putting Venezuela in the context of what we are taught to call Latin America, or Latin America, South America, and the Caribbean, there is something that needs to be said, that Venezuela also is a Caribbean country, or a Caribbean country. Venezuela is the country in South America with the longest Caribbean coastal line. Not even Cuba, which is the bigger of all the islands, have so many kilometers of coastal line. So we are a Caribbean country, and we have like 3 big islands and 3,000 islets in our coastal Caribbean zone. Also, we have the Andean mountains of the south. We are a country that is connected with the Andean plateau, with the Andean chain of mountains. Geographically, we are twice the size of Germany, 3 times the size of Italy, maybe seventh time the size of Lithuania. Like, in fact, Belgium is a country. We have one state where you can put Belgium twice. So Venezuela is not like a little country in South America. And you see the map, you sometimes get, distort images. But you know who made the maps. So it's important to highlight that. And the population in Venezuela is another thing that you might get wrong if you go directly to, the more popular website. In Venezuela, which is a region that Colón found it out in his 3rd trip in 1498. He was called by him the land of grace, la tierra de gracia. It's a beautiful country with no less than 55 national parks, with a very large native Venezuelan population composed by the Carib nation, by the Arawak nation, also by the Timotocuica nation. Those were the original native Venezuelans that were there when Colón got to those lands. But as part of the slave trade, Venezuela also took part in that process. Africans were put there to cultivate the land in this machinery, in that industrial machinery that was called the plantation system. And because that, Africans were imported to Venezuela in big numbers. And the reason was the plantation economy required a lot of slaves. For 1 hectare, to cultivate 1 hectare of cocoa, for example, you will need 1 slave. And the average size of a plantation in our country used to be 5,000 hectares. So you have a family of an slave owner, maybe, let's say, 10 family members. That owner, if he owns a plantation, he will have 5,000 slaves. So you will see that along the road, the African population was growing by economical need. The more slaves you have, the more land you can cultivate, and of course, the more money you will make out of that. I'm putting this as an important point to highlight, to let you know how the population in Venezuela was really, from the beginning, composed by the 3 original mix that along the road, in our country in particular, was really, really strong, the process of mixing. However, by 1812, the Spaniards, colonizers, they conducted a census. And in that census, the register are kept, and it's shown that by 1812, already African descendants were 56 to 60% of the population. When you check those statistics of the census, by 1812, and the Spaniards were very good at taking the statistics, because it was something that was really connecting with the economical advance of their colonies. Yes, we have no less than between 56 and, let's say, 60% of those inhabitants were already slaves. And the reason is, you can understand, it was a plantation economy. However, it was after the colonial war, or during the colonial war, as you can imagine, the armies of the rebel Venezuelan army that was fighting against Spain, as you can imagine, was mainly composed by people of color. They were the ones that were taken out of the plantation with the promise of independence for our country. They were put in the armies to fight against Spain, and after 15 years of war, we got our victory. However, after that, the slaves again were put into the plantation. They weren't granted the freedom of the emancipation. Our emancipation battle, the final emancipation battle in our country was in 1821. And by that year, when Venezuela finally sealed its independence, it was not until 1854 when finally, how many years after? Between 1821 and 1854, how many years passed? Do the math. How many? 33 years. You know, after 33 years, still the African Venezuelans were kept in slavery. But you know, by those days, in 1854, the political elite in Venezuela would not like to be perceived as a backward country, as the leaders of a backward country. They want to look good in the international community. And of course, they signed the Emancipation Act. But when we study the history, the Emancipation Act signing was not based in compassion, was not based in a deep reflection of human rights, but was based in economic reason. Because we have in South America and the Spanish colonies something that was called the El Código Negro, the black code. And the Código Negro, the black code, was a set of law addressing how to keep an slave. The Spanish crown enacted this law because at the end of the day they considered that in some sort of way the slave needs some quote-unquote human treatment. The master should provide housing, food, clothing for the slave. That was a law. When the Venezuelan elite, by 1854, started making the numbers, that was not a good business for them. Because it was cheaper to keep a worker than to maintain a slave. And in addition, they agreed with the Venezuelan Congress in making a law that will ensure them indemnization. You know the word? Indemnization? Or compensation. The slave master granted by themselves a special right. Once they emancipate the slave, the Venezuelan government should pay money to them. And that money was because the loss that they will be suffering when they emancipate the slave. That is some sort of compensation. So they were winning twice. They were winning because they got indemnization after the liberation of the slave, and they were winning because now for them will be cheaper to keep something that you will call in this country a system of identity servitude. Correct? You remember that word? Identity servitude?
Yeah.
You don't need to be a slave, but you were so forced to work for that person that at the end of the day you ended like an slave. Because all those Afro-Venezuelans that were, quote unquote, enjoying the goods of the freedom, they don't have another option but keep working in the same plantation with the same old master because there were no jobs available for them. And the master were smart enough to create a system that keep them in some sort of relation of ownership towards that former slave. For example, okay, the master will say, okay, you can work for me now, but again, remember, you are free. I don't have any duty towards you. I don't need to provide house to you. I don't need to provide clothing and food for you. You work for me, I will pay you a salary. But they create this weak system, wicked system, where they create a token. Every plantation creates a specific token that was used as a coin. And with that particular token that belongs to that particular farm or that particular plantation, you just have to write to buy things in the warehouse of the former master that you have. So that is a third reason, because I am telling you that the slave emancipation was not something that came in our country as a goodwill or human rights motivation, but because of financial motivation. So if you are following me, if you are, again, the fourth was that they, after the signing of the emancipation, they also granted by themselves this grant, this right. The Emancipation Proclaim established that to have the right to exercise the Emancipation Act, you will need to be at least 30 years. So if you were a 1-year-old baby, when you were in 1854, you still need to wait 30 more years to start exercising your freedom. So they still keep slaves 30 years more after that, counting all those kids that were born in that year, 1854. And if you were 20, you still need to wait for 10 years more to really exercise your freedom as a man, as a free woman in that country. This is the, let's say, historical context of the situation of the African Venezuelans since the colonial days and even after the liberation of the colonial crown. Well, after that, until today, many struggles have happened. After that, our country never got like Jim Crow official discrimination law or apartheid like that in South Africa, but with all those social conditions under where we and our ancestors used to live, it was clear that when you were counting which or who were the poorest in our society, it was easy to understand why. Mostly of the African Venezuelans were poor. In addition, they were located in isolated communities, and in those communities, because rural communities where the plantation were located at, the traditional governments of the 20th century, they never got concerned in develop economically and socially those places. Again, that is that is the backing of our social reality. However, if we take into account that by 1812, we already were like 56% of the population. Today, the last census that was recorded in Caracas last year already have shown the numbers. And based on the numbers, we now are no less than 60% of the population. And again, this is against the common wisdom that you will find in the internet, because if you go to any website, you go, let's say, to the CIA World Fact Book, you will find that in Venezuela, black people compose like 10% of the population. And that gives you a wrong idea of a reality that is not like that. Because regardless of the color of the skin, African descendant in Venezuela, due to the mixing process that we endured during these 300 and some years, we are now a real mixed society, but where the prevalent ancestor always goes and dates back to Africa in different sort of combination. And in the census this last census was a good tool to understand that, because we put like 3 categories, and these 3 categories, if you pick at least one of those, it's totally obvious that you were, or you are, an African descendant in combination with different ethnic groups like native Venezuelan or Europeans, mainly Spaniards from Spain that are descendants of the colonized. Well, this is the reality today in terms of ethnicity. During the last 10 years, after what we call the Bolivarian Revolution process, which was a process of social change that started in 1999 when President Chavez came to power, many aspects of the society were shaken down. Because we're supposed to have a country with no racial discrimination, we're supposed to have a prosperous country, and the reality was that regardless of the fact that we were one of the top oil producers of the world, when we study the reality, in our society we got like 80% of poverty. How is it possible that a country that is so rich in oil and natural gas and all that have a society with a poverty level of 80% in different categories of poverty? It is not just one kind of poverty. We in Venezuela divide it in structural poverty, from general poverty, poverty in terms of access to service. This is a combination of facts that told us that we were a country, a rich, poor country. And that is something that is not good. To know that is something that made you feel bad as a Venezuelan. And with this process of social change that has been started, that started in 1999, as I said, many things were shaken down, and the main goal was how we Venezuelans get the best for our people out of that richness that we have. And because that many national policies and Venezuelan policies towards foreign countries should change. Specifically that policy that deal with how we make money out of oil. How can we, in agreement with our partner of the Organization of Oil Producers, set the stage in the world to obtain more benefit from the raw material that we have in our country. And you know, in the international arena, that is a problem. Because the big power of the world that used to control all the sources of raw material, they always want cheap raw materials coming to their markets. Despite the fact that with those cheap prices, you are keeping undeveloped the country that really originates the richness. And it's a problem, because we have a corporate society in the US, and the corporate society, energy lobby is a big power. And the energy lobby put the money for the election. And the public officials that are elected have a compromise with those lobbies of the energy area, and they also are pressing to get cheap oil in the US. And that includes many techniques that can be used, from bad publicity that is broadcast against the country that is trying to make the change to get more money for its oil, to the other extreme, which is open or undercover destabilization. Destabilization. That has happened. And you don't need to believe me, you just need to read the newspapers in the last 10 years in terms of what has been going on in Venezuela. And the other thing is to tarnish the reputation of the leaders that are trying to make the change. Venezuela have that problem in terms of the bilateral political relation with the US. You as students must be clear on that, because we, the American people and the Venezuelan people, are just common people that want to make a living in a country where our ancestors were placed without asking for it. But at least if we live in a land which has richness, and if we live in a land that has resources, we would like to take part of the well-being that those resources produce and try to spread the wealth among the majority of our population to create affordable housing programs, to create free education programs for all, to create free health care for everybody. All those things that cost money in this society, for example. Today, we are proud to tell you that those services are free in our country. You can get from preschool, from kindergarten, to a doctoral program totally for free, because education is a right in our country. Education is a right, and the right is ensured in our Constitution. Again, we have a public health system that is totally for free. You go in every neighborhood, we have set a system of health care that will ensure for every citizen to have a physician as close as possible, even inside the neighborhood, even inside the shanty town that still we have in Venezuela, but that are going every day better with this kind of services that we are providing to the community. And oil pays for that, of course. Natural gas pays for that. Therefore, we need good prices in the international market. Therefore, if you are getting good prices in the international market, you are benefiting a majority of the population of Venezuela, and therefore, you are benefiting the Afro-Venezuelan that are the largest group that live in our country, again, in every kind of mixing combination that you might see in the so-called racial spectrum. It's very important. Other very important aspect is that because during the last 10 years, never than before, the Afro-Venezuelan movement, the Afro-Venezuelan activism has been involved in a strong political lobbying, and the Venezuelan government has understood that there is a debt to pay in this particular aspect of the lacking of access of the Afro-Venezuelan to the wealth of the country. Let's say, for example, in 2006, President Chavez signed an act enacting the Presidential Commission to eliminate racial discrimination in the educational system at all levels. Because our history was written by persons with an Eurocentric mentality, and they never put the African descendants or the native Venezuela in a good standing as a part of the real builders of our nationality, of our society. We were always playing like a tertiary or secondary role, when in the reality we were the one that put the blood and flesh in front of the canyons of the Spaniards. But we were, left behind. Now we need to correct our textbook so we can teach to our students from the preschool up to the university which was the real story, what's really happened, and which role did us play in that struggle for independence. So that Presidential Commission is working. This year, this very year, the President Chavez also signed a national act creating the Presidential National Commission for the advancement of the Afro-Venezuelan communities. I am a member of that commission, and our role is to create and propose new avenues to speed the development in our African communities, or in those places where historically more Afro-Venezuelans are living. Because I told you before, those communities lack in development in comparison with the other metropolitan areas, and even inside the metropolitan areas, the neighborhoods where the African Venezuelans live in most numbers, in greater numbers, are lacking in terms of access to social service, health service that usually are more prevalent in other places. But again, with this process of coming to a better sharing of the oil wealth, even those communities are getting better attention from part of the government. In 2006, was signed an agreement among 20 universities to create what we call the free share for Africa. Every university each one of those universities have created we would call here a regular chair that is dedicated to talk, to speak, motivate, and organize events around what is the African role today and which part is taking, or which part now are taking the Afro-Venezuelan in this political struggle. We also have hosted during the last 6 years 4 festivals, a special festival called the Festival with the People of Africa. And in those festivals, we invite people from all of the Americas and the Caribbean and people from Africa to share cultural experiences. We have also an intellectuals gathering as a part of that festival, and a gathering of women of the diaspora as a part of that festival, and also as a get-together of youth of the diaspora. And we have hosted that festival 4 times during the last 6 years. As you see, there are many new things that are giving the Afro-Venezuelans pride of being Afro-Venezuelan and the pride of being part of the political process that is going on in the country in a good standing and not just as observers. And to end with, I will tell you that never than before in the country we now have elected and appointees officials that are Afro-Venezuelan. For example, today the vice president of the country is an Afro-Venezuelan who used to be professor at my university. The university where I come from is the university, the name is long, the name is Polytechnical Territorial University of Barlovento, Argelia Laya. Argelia Laya was the first Afro-Venezuelan woman in Congress. That was back in the 70s. And that president, the vice president today, used to be a professor in my university and also is an African descendant, which was born in Barlovento, which is the region of Miranda State where mostly of the Afro-Venezuelan was placed during the slave trade, because that was our area full of plantations. Again, we have never had so many Congress members that are African descendants. For the first time in history, like 5 years ago, we have a Minister of Defense that was an Afro-Venezuelan. And all these commissions that I mentioned to you before are headed by Afro-Venezuelan men and women. For the first time, Venezuelan Foreign Affairs Office decided to open a division, a special division, to deal with Africa. And now we have a vice minister for African Affairs, which is dealing with the African region. And during the last 10 years, we have opened 15 new embassies in Africa. So we take pride in get closer to our to the African countries where many of our ancestors came. And the political relations have been getting as much close or as close as never before. In addition to that, we have a special vice minister for foreign affairs that is dealing with the Caribbean region. And you know, the Caribbean region mostly is integrated by islands that were former colonies of France and Britain. The population of African descendants in the Caribbean is huge, and we have special agreements with those countries to provide them oil in long terms of payment with a special discount, only to collaborate and contribute with the development of those countries in the Caribbean. And it's called the Agreement of San Jose, El Acuerdo de San Jose. And taking into account education, which is our area, during the last 10 years, we opened a scholarship program that is fully financed by the Venezuelan government, and this program is addressing the following fact. We know that in the Caribbean and in Africa, the underdeveloped still is rampant. So we are providing a full scholarship to the African student of impoverished background to come to our country and get a college degree. And totally, the money that is put for that is totally offered with any kind of payback from the African countries by the Venezuelan government. We have now in Venezuela no less than 300 African students, without taking into account the other African descendants of the Caribbean that also are enjoying this program in our country, as well as people from South America, like countries, for example, like Salvador, Nicaragua, Bolivia, that are also in Venezuela getting college degree under full scholarship provided by the Venezuelan government. That is what you use the oil for when you want to create solidarity and cooperation among the nation. Because to the final part of my presentation, I will say this. Venezuela sees the oil as a tool to create cooperation and solidarity, as a tool to develop not only our country, but the countries that surround our region, but also those countries with which we have historical connections. And of course, South America and Africa and the Caribbean region are deeply rooted and intertwined in the history of our country. And because of that reason, our national policies conceive that as a duty and something that needs to be done to create what we call new political balance in the world. We believe not in a world where just one big power needs to be dictating everything. We believe in a world where many people and many countries, many nations can get together and create what we call multipolarity. That is the opposition of unipolarity in terms of the international relations. And that is the reason why we are here. because we believe on that, and these students and myself are coming here visiting different universities of this country, UNC, NCCU in North Carolina, Howard University in Washington, UDC, Washington DC, this university, this is my second time coming here. Our goal is to create and sign formal agreement with the authorities of this university so Venezuelan students can come here and learn with you guys about the dynamic of this society. And also you can go to our country and learn about the dynamics of our country. We also opened this program with a semester abroad that was conducted by Professor Joseph Jordan, the director of the Sonja Stone Center for African History and Culture in UNC, University of North Carolina. And he spent 4 months with 15 students down there in Venezuela in a semester abroad program. Again, we would like to sign agreement with as many universities as possible to do the same as we did with him. And this is the first time when I came here with students of Venezuela for a short period. We've been here since 28th of August. So we need to leave tomorrow. But this is like this spearhead of future possibilities of sharing, connection, and of course, the goal is to connect people to people, because we believe in what we call peoples-to-people democracy and peoples-to-people diplomacy, because that helps to build better relations for the future in terms of equality and self-respect and mutual respect between both countries and between both societies. Because beyond the government's line, societies always remain. And it's up to us to connect. And if we are African descendants, we have the duty to connect with the diaspora. And if we are Latin American, we have the duty to connect with our brothers and sisters of Latin America, because we are tied by the language, but we are also tied by the common history, because we both were colonies of Spain. Our goal for the future is to be a big power with a good heart, to help other people and not to conquer or destroy. Again, that was my presentation, and feel free to ask questions to me.
So at this time, I'm hoping you guys have some questions, not just for the professor, but also you've heard of many of the examples that he put forth about life in Venezuela right now, things that I hope there are putting some question marks in your head right now, and some ideas that with the vast amount of monetary resources this country has, why is the average American college student graduating with $25,000 in debt to start with on average? Why do we still have something that, yes, as I said before, this is what this class is for, to push you outside those little boxes that you've been put into, that some of you, have been comfortable with, push you outside, because most of you don't know that 44,000, and so he was talking about humanity, all right? You need to look at humanity first before you start to see yourself as an American or a Venezuelan or what have you. Look at humanity. And if you look at humanity, then you should understand, you should come to the core that beyond, my nationality, I don't want to see people die needlessly. Well, in this country, 44,000 Americans die every single year simply because they do not have health insurance. Still to this day, we don't have a national single-payer health care system. That was the Affordable Health Care Act, which primarily benefits the health insurance companies, and that's a whole other story. And even when it fully kicks in 2015, there will still be 17 to 20 million people left off of that ledger. In places like Cuba and Venezuela and Norway and Switzerland, where you're from, people have universal health care. So I hope that you have some, so it has fomented some ideas, but some questions. But these students have a lot of insight to provide, in addition to, obviously, their wonderful professor. So let the questions begin. I know. Do you have a question?
Una segunda, está diciendo que bueno que entiendan ellos que, por ejemplo, todas las cosas que hemos hablado de Venezuela, que las comparen con lo que pasa en Estados Unidos. ¿Cómo es posible que en Estados Unidos un estudiante ya cuando se gradúa en promedio ya tenga encima una deuda de $25,000 que pagar por el hecho de que tuvo que pedir un préstamo para estudiar? Es una deuda bajita, una deuda en promedio mucho más grande. Y el hecho de que más o menos anualmente 44.000 personas mueran en este país por el hecho de que no tienen seguro médico y no pueden asistir y curarse, simplemente se mueren. Que tengan eso en cuenta en comparación con otros países como Suiza, de donde este muchacho, donde hay lo que llaman seguro de cobertura médica universal para todo el mundo, y donde actualmente el estudiante norteamericano, más que pensar en ser individual y como miembro de un país llamado Estados Unidos, que pensemos como sean parte de la humanidad. ¿Cómo es posible que como parte de la humanidad tengamos estas contradicciones entre lo que puede hacerse en un país y lo que no se hace en otro? Eso ha sido algo que es importante aquí, sobre todo para que los estudiantes le hagan preguntas a ustedes que han sido testigos de las cosas que en Venezuela han venido pasando. Eso es lo que decía el profesor, y también está diciendo que no solamente me dejen preguntar a mí, sino que le pueden hacer preguntas a ustedes para checar su opinión. So, okay. ¿Está bien? ¿Lo traduje bien? Okay. Your name, please, and what department are you?
My name is Aaron. I'm studying criminal justice and government.
Yo estoy estudiando ciencia de justicia criminal, como de hecho en Venezuela. Se llama Eric. Your name is Eric?
Aaron.
Aaron, the Bible name?
Yes.
All right. Se llama
So,
Aaron.
America is a capitalist nation. Profit is everyone's goal. Everyone wants profit.
Okay, Estados Unidos es un país capitalista donde todo el mundo quiere hacer ganancias.
But that being said, there's no concept of free, really. There's no free anything.
De manera que aquí el concepto de las cosas gratis no existe. Aquí nada es gratis.
So when you say that there's free education, free healthcare,
Tú dices que la educación es gratis y que la salud es gratis.
I'm confused what that means, because someone needs to get paid. There has to be money involved. Is it through taxes? Is it through, I don't know, is the government
Yo
paying
me
them?
confundo porque entonces, ¿quién paga por eso? Tiene que haber dinero metido en el negocio. O sea, ¿quién paga por eso? Well, I told you already. When you live in a country, you know, to start with, there is no country with more oil reserve, with more certified oil reserve in the world than Venezuela. Okay? Venezuela has today enough oil to keep the world economy going for 200 years more. Okay? And all the oil that have been gotten out of the Venezuelan soil during the last 100 years, still we have more underneath our soil. You know, oil makes money. The issue is that when you are taught that money, the first goal of money is make more money, you get caught in that trap. And it's almost impossible to understand. When you have those resources, you don't pay to Mother Nature for those resources. If you live in a capitalist country, let's start applying the capitalist law to our relationship with the nature. The United Nations set a panel of scientists. And you know what they agree on? 600 scientists of the world. They discovered that at the rate of use of the natural resources that we are taking out of the planet, if God will come to ask us for the bill, we will need another planet Earth annually to pay the bill annually. So the capitalist system is based on something that is untrue. Because it's you where to pay. It's capitalists of this world will like to pay, or will need to pay what they take for free from Mother Nature. They will never will be able to pay the debt. With that being said, you need to understand that it's a political decision on how to use the resources that produce money that are in your country that do not belong to corporations but belong to all the people that build that nation. To all the people that put flesh and blood to build that nation. They pay a price. We pay a price. Your ancestors pay a price to be here. Your ancestors too. And the Native American. Any Native American here? On the house? No. But they did pay. All right? So you put that in the right perspective, you will say, all right, what they are doing is what we call social investment. Because when you invest in people, that investment always pays. You know, when you invest in people, when you invest in a kid to start and go all over the system, you will invest in safety and security. Because you will be ending with a professional and not with a criminal that will be put in jail, and to build those jails you need to take money, and in this industrial penitentiary system you are now making money out of the prisoner building more prisons, and everything is, like self-feed. If you see my point, maybe you can understand why. Who pays? Who really pays? Our work paid. That already was paid by our ancestors. We're just collecting at least a little bit of that debt. But this is require a totally different mindset. And some people will call that communism, some people will call that socialism, and there are countries that have been into war just because that idea. You see? And it's not fair that you, brothers and sisters, pay with blood, more blood, just to defend that idea, when it's natural for the humankind to be part of a whole system of self-help. And thanks God we have this planet that provides the resources. But we are stubborn and decided that those resources have a price and that somebody needs to pay for this and this and this. That is the political contest that is around any answer to that question. Require a political decision, and that political decision is sustainable. It can be sustainable in time. That fallacy that it's impossible to sustain a free system, quote unquote, a free system, is a fallacy. And if they teach you that fallacy, you need to challenge with facts. And the United Nations is a good work with that panel of scientists. How can you believe if I am a capitalist country or capitalist world, I need to annually pay $36,000 of trillion annually. And to produce that, I need every year another planet Earth to produce that kind of amount of money. That is unsustainable, isn't it? That is my answer. Okay. This gentleman and you.
My name is Sadiq Abubakar.
Said Abubakar.
Sadiq.
Sadiq Abubakar. That is his name. That is his number.
I'm in the Mechanical Engineering Graduate Program.
Está estudiando posgrado en Ingeniería Mecánica.
I really want to thank you for the eye-opening because some of the things you've said, this is the first time I'm hearing them.
Me agradezco que nos haya dado esta información que me ha abierto los ojos. Muchas de las cosas que te he dicho es la primera vez que las oigo.
Regarding the issue of how the Afro-Venezuelan is doing today, the Nyumburu Cultural Center and myself, we're trying to organize a Pan-African youth conference.
Okay, en relación a lo que tú has dicho sobre los afro-venezolanos y sus avances, debo decirte que nosotros aquí en el Centro Cultural Casa de la Libertad estamos tratando de organizar una conferencia, digamos, de la diáspora africana, de la juventud de la diáspora africana. Youth Conference.
Youth conferences. What the youth conference is all about is to be able to reassess or assess the state of the African or black youth in the world.
Lo que trataría esta conferencia es de poder evaluar cuál es el estatus actual de la juventud que es parte de la diáspora africana en el mundo.
And how to chart a system of development for all African youth worldwide.
Y tratar de diseñar un sistema que le permita a la juventud de la diáspora africana en el mundo desarrollarse, progresar.
And I'm trying to offer this open request that because of your background, we would want you to come and then be a presenter. Hopefully bring a lot of students from Venezuela.
Y por la experiencia que usted tiene, me gustaría ofrecerle la oportunidad de que usted venga y haga presentaciones en esta conferencia y que también venga con un buen grupo de estudiantes de Venezuela.
Thank you.
Gracias. Thank you to you. Are you originally from?
Ghana.
Y él es originario de un país africano llamado Ghana. My friend?
Hi, my name is Tim. I'm a public health student here.
Undergrad?
Yeah.
Él es un estudiante de pregrado de salud pública aquí. Se llama Timothy.
Right. I'm originally from Switzerland. I came here to go to university.
Y él es originalmente de Suiza y vino aquí para asistir a la universidad.
And I like to ask the students, since here in America, even at the college level, history is very much focused on America, and we're not taught a lot about different countries and their history. So,
y yo como me he dado cuenta que el sistema aquí educativo norteamericano en las universidades, en lo que refiere a la parte de historia, solamente focaliza en la historia de los Estados Unidos, yo quisiera preguntarle, would you like to ask?
How that is in Venezuela and how other countries and their history and their culture is incorporated in the educational system.
¿Cómo es en Venezuela? ¿Cómo es en Venezuela eso? Si en el sistema universitario se incorpora información de los estudios de la historia o de las realidades de otros países. Esa es la pregunta.
¿Con el micrófono? Sí.
¿Puedes decir?
No, sí, así.
Al fin y al cabo yo veo claro.
Bueno,
Ajá, pero ya va. Como es estudiante, usted y usted hablan español, ¿verdad?
Sí.
Ahora aprovechen y practiquen.
¿Usted quiere que yo lo
Usted le traduce a ver, por favor, si es tan amable, para que una voz diferente se oiga en el escenario. Sí, ¿no? Porque tengo una traductora especial de Dominican Republic.
Toma el micrófono.
No, está bien.
I order her to translate. Bien tarde.
Bueno, en cuanto a la parte de afrodescendencia en las universidades,
In terms of like Afro-Descendants in the universities,
hay una universidad como donde trabaja el profesor, que es la Universidad Argelia Laya.
okay, so there's a university that he works at, Argelia
Laia.
Laya, that's the lady that he was talking about, that was the congresswoman.
Esa es especial, es histórica, lo que llamaría históricamente de afrodescendientes, y se especializa en el análisis de la historia de la afrodescendencia y toda la diáspora africana.
Okay, so that university in particular like specializes in, that university in particular specializes in the history of the African descendants in Venezuela.
Oh, en the diaspora.
In the diaspora.
Dentro de esa es como la universidad modelo, por así decirlo. De ahí varias universidades se van a ir acoplando al sistema.
Okay, so essentially that university kind of sets the model because that's its focus, and other universities kind of have an example or kind of a smaller concentration of similar example of what the university is doing.
En cuanto a la parte internacional, sí es más, por así decirlo, más abierta, es más variada, por así decirlo.
En cuanto a la historia que...
A la historia sí, internacional.
Que se enseña de otros países.
Okay.
Exacto.
And then, so in terms of like the histories that they teach, in terms of international countries, it's more of an open, it's more like an open interpretation of what, it's not necessarily like the United States where it's like focused on what the U.S. has done. It's more of like what are these countries, the history of that specific country. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay, thank you.
Sí, es enfocada, creo que como tú lo estás diciendo, que no es solo enfocada a Estados Unidos. Exactamente. La historia no es enfocada solo a Estados Unidos, pero el modelo, o sea, como las películas que llegan, la mayoría son de Estados Unidos, las películas y todo lo que pasa por los medios es Estados Unidos, entonces se absorbe mucho el modelo estadounidense, el modelo americano, sí. Se puede apreciar en la televisión el patrón norteamericano.
Okay, and then I guess in terms of the United States, I guess the media plays an important role in that because you can, you can have more of an idea of like what goes on in the U.S. society through the movies and through the TV shows, etc. So that's how they learn about the U.S. society.
Then we need to put this in context. She's talking in this moment about there is like the formal education in the system that can be more eye-opening to the realities of the world, but also we have a media where the U.S. information is always present, and the student need to, to try and challenge if that information is really in context, which is taught in the university about the U.S., but the students are getting not only the U.S. in the educational system. That was your question. Again, this is important because Venezuela historically has had an Eurocentric model of education. Generally, what is going on in the educational model is dealing more with seeing Europe and the US and the North as the founding father of the culture of the humanity.
To this day.
Even to this day, we are in a process of reform. Remember I told you about the commission to eliminate racial discrimination in education? Because when you have that kind of model in place, the Eurocentric model is a way of racial discrimination. Because the Eurocentric view just conceives the world through the eyes of the white races of Europe and not take into account the contribution of the Middle East, the contribution of Africa or the contribution of the Far East culture that are even older. And in fact, the European culture got bigger because they were able to learn experience that were even older than their own. But the Eurocentric model now says, and is like a philosophy, that the civilization comes from Europe. And that is the wrong thing that we need to start breaking. Because every country has something to take to the table that is worth to be analyzed, but not just one. And if you add to that those countries were the ones that conquered Africa, conquered South America, and Central America, North America, you will end up believing that you were part of a culture that never existed before Europeans came to, colonize. And that is something that we are challenging in our educational system today. And every now, never than before, we are pressing in the educational system the contribution of the native Venezuelan, the contribution of Africa, and also the understanding of the realities, of the political realities of this world today, and the interconnection. I think that as an average, the Venezuelan student is more exposed to diversity in terms of opinions in that area. See, if you compare him or her with what is being done in the European countries or in the US. That is the reason why they are more like, they might be showing greater level of discomfort for the reality of this world today. Sorry.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
And this is to the young women, primarily to the young women on the panel. I wanted to ask you a question. We're talking about inequities in different societies, and for instance, in America, in 2012, a lot of folks don't know that for every dollar that a white individual gets in the U.S. on average, a black person receives 57 cents to a dollar. 57 cents.
Okay. Él está diciéndole que, en términos de las cosas que deben saber, por ejemplo, aquí en Estados Unidos, en promedio, en cuanto a ingresos, por cada dólar que le ingresa al bolsillo a un estadounidense, digamos, blanco, por el mismo tipo de trabajo, por el mismo tipo de dólar que se ingresa a un afroamericano, le ingresa en promedio 50 centavos. Y él quiere preguntarle a las mujeres en función de esto que se llama igualdad de género. You're talking about gender equity and all those stuff.
Yeah.
So the question is?
Yeah, so speaking of inequities, I mean, clearly, there's still a lot of gender inequities as well in the U.S. And I wanted to know what, if any, gender inequities exist in Venezuela, and if yes or even no, what is the role that women play within that society? And as the two of you as young women, what is your level of empowerment? How do you feel as young women, in Venezuelan society?
Normalmente tres preguntas. Uno, en términos de igualdad de género en relación a lo que se paga en los trabajos, ¿qué observan ustedes en Venezuela? Si hay igualdad por el mismo trabajo pagado un hombre o una mujer. En términos de ustedes, como mujeres, ¿qué notan ustedes si en la sociedad venezolana las mujeres tienen el mismo nivel de empoderamiento que los hombres? O sea, de acceso a bienestar, a puestos de trabajo, empoderamiento también tiene que ver con posiciones de comando y liderazgo, si las mujeres están al igual que los hombres. And the other part was equity, gender equity, empowerment of women,
and what, like, being, two young women, like, how do they feel? What's the level of empowerment? How do they feel as young women entering? I guess maybe they're going to postgraduate studies, but even entering the workforce. What kind of role do they feel they play?
¿Y cuáles son las expectativas como mujeres ustedes pueden tener al momento de que ya se gradúen y vayan a entrar a la fuerza de trabajo del país? Eso.
Okay.
Para ti.
Sí. Okay. Hola, mi nombre es Yesenia Villasmil. Tengo 19 años y soy estudiante de periodismo.
She's 19 years old, she's studying communications.
Y acerca de las preguntas que me acaban de hacer, el rol de la mujer en Venezuela ha sido muy importante desde que llegó a la presidencia Hugo Chávez.
¿El qué?
El rol.
So, essentially, the role of women has become increasingly more important, specifically when Chávez became president.
La mujer ha alcanzado cargos públicos muy importantes.
Women have been able to hold important political places,
Como por ejemplo la presidencia del Consejo Nacional Electoral.
¿El qué?
El Consejo Nacional Electoral. Él es el encargado de, en las elecciones, el que controla y regula el proceso electoral.
Okay. I don't know this word in English, but essentially it's the person who's in charge of like the electoral process. Does anyone know what that is?
But in Venezuela we have a national power that is called electoral power.
Okay.
In Venezuela you have not 3 powers or 3 branches of government.
Sí.
You have the one that you have here, but in addition we have the electoral power that is elected by the people, and they deal with all the electoral process that we have in our country at the state level, county level, and of course national level.
Okay.
And today the president of that council is a woman.
Okay.
También se creó un ministerio, que es el Ministerio de la Mujer, para tratar todos los temas relacionados con el género femenino.
There's also a Ministry of Women's Studies,
Women Affairs.
Women Affairs.
Y bueno, esto se ha venido incrementando desde que nuestro presidente llegó al poder y aún sigue alcanzando más poder en todo el ambiente político y social.
Okay. And so this has been started since Chavez became president, and it continues to like increase and expand in terms of like political positions.
Cosa que nunca se había visto en muchos años.
And this is something that hasn't happened for a very long time. Sí, en cuanto a tu experiencia y...
En cuanto a la diferencia de los géneros, sí hay igualdad porque como la mujer últimamente, bueno, en Venezuela se ve mucho de que las mujeres son separadas, que no viven con sus maridos, entonces se ven en la necesidad de buscar empleo y todo eso, y con todos esos programas que se han creado, sí ha habido como igualdad en la parte del trabajo, pues sí ganan igual por las necesidades de las mujeres de mantener a su familia ellas solas.
Okay, so she was talking about like in terms of society there, like not I wouldn't say like a great number, but there are some women are single parents, and there are like opportunities, not only programs, but opportunities for them to work, so that they can maintain themselves and their families, and that's something that has been kind of increasing in their society now, that they have like equal opportunities.
Y también existe una ley de que tiene que haber igualdad en cuanto al salario del trabajo. Pues si una mujer o un hombre está ejerciendo trabajo, tiene que ser igual para los dos, no porque sea hombre o mujer, debe ser igual.
And there's also a law that states that if a woman and a man hold the same position, they will get paid the same way, that a man shouldn't get paid more than a female because of his gender.
Sin importar el color, ni el tamaño, ni...
Yeah, so no discrimination, gender, racial, etc. Bueno, él quería saber más de su experiencia personal en cuanto a sus estudios o su vida como profesional. Si ustedes piensan que tienen una...
Va a encontrar fuente de trabajo fácilmente.
Sí, como si tiene algo positivo, si tú piensas positivo de que tú puedes encontrar un trabajo porque eres una mujer o en comparación con su colega.
Bueno, por lo menos yo ahorita me acabo de graduar como de high school y quiero empezar a estudiar arquitectura, entonces todavía como no estoy muy metida en una carrera como tal, pero sí hay oportunidades de trabajo.
She says as of right now she just graduated from high school and she's interested in architecture, and like there are a lot of opportunities for her in terms of like study and also work related.
Bueno, en cuanto a mí, no he tenido mucha experiencia como tal porque no he ingresado al campo laboral, nada más me estoy dedicando ahorita a los estudios universitarios.
So as of right now she's not...
como persona que ya trabaja y si ha tenido acceso a posiciones de trabajo que sean lo suficientemente dignas, ¿no?, para una mujer en Venezuela. Eso es parte del mundo.
A ver, por ejemplo, mi mamá es periodista, estoy siguiendo el modelo de ella, y ella ha sido una profesional exitosa, si se puede ver desde la perspectiva de género como mujer, ha alcanzado roles muy importantes en el trabajo, en el poder, los cuales no ha sido tan difícil de encontrar como pudiera ser aquí en Estados Unidos.
Okay. So for her personally, like she's still in her studies, so she hasn't like really been looking for jobs. I guess move up in rank and have positions that otherwise, I guess in comparison to the women in the United States, wouldn't be able to move up as quickly or wouldn't have those opportunities.
More questions?
Lisa?
My name is Jennifer Reeves, and I'm a programs manager for diversity at the American Red Cross. And I was just wondering, you spoke of the program that Venezuela currently has, where it allows for students within the Caribbean area to come and study there. How does that affect immigration, and what are the immigration laws as far as these students coming in? It's really, I guess, for you.
No, but I need to understand.
Oh, yeah.
It's important to make them part of the conversation. I will answer to you.
So, estaba hablando de la beca que ustedes tienen para traer estudiantes del Caribe o de África para estudiar a su universidad. Ella quería saber cómo eso afecta a la inmigración y el estado social.
Well, first, those students are not under the category of immigrants. They are taking the courses by part of the agreement said that they must go back to their countries to give back to the communities. Okay, they are not immigrating from their countries. There is an agreement between both governments. Venezuela have the duty, and we are fulfilling that duty to send back those students. And the government of the country where they come from, they need to set the stage for them to work and start delivering the goods in those societies. So because the intention of the program is to contribute to the development of the other country. And it's based in an agreement between both governments. It's a government-to-government agreement. It depends on every country to have in place programs that will absorb all those professionals that are going back to their countries. All right? Is that the answer that you would like? Okay.
Yes.
That is the reality. Yo le estoy diciendo que nosotros esos muchachos para nosotros son inmigrantes. Son estudiantes que van a hacer preparación. Y luego Venezuela, por contrato, está obligado a enviarlo y el país, por supuesto, a recibirlo y darle el trabajo de acuerdo a los planes que ellos han hecho. Porque eso es para desarrollar los países. That is one of the phases of the cooperation. And we call that, we believe in what is not competitive among the nation, but cooperation among the nation to produce development.
Hi, my name is Lisa Williams. I graduated last semester in English and history, and I did a little bit of Latin American history. So I actually, basically, I guess understood what you were saying in the presentation, that it was very, I guess, holistic, and it added flesh to what I already knew. So thank you for that. I also have friends in the.
Can you translate for them that part? Before you get lost?
Ella estaba agradeciendo por lo que dijo la presentación de la historia de Venezuela. Ella ha estudiado la historia de Latinoamérica y le ha ayudado a poner en contexto lo que ella ha estudiado.
Okay. And I actually have friends who have studied in Venezuela and in Cuba as well. And some of them are there and some of them have graduated from the program. So I understood what you were saying.
Okay, so there's a question?
Yes, there is one.
Okay. Que ella tiene amigos que han estudiado en Venezuela y en Cuba con ese mismo sistema de la beca.
What I'd like to know is from the students especially, how the relationship is between students from the Caribbean and Africa and everywhere else who come in, the natives of Venezuela. Because it can be very group specific or clique-wise. Even though they're studying in the school, that doesn't mean that they are experiencing diversity or they are exchanging culturally. So I'd like to know their experience with them.
Okay. So yo quiero saber cómo ustedes se relacionan, bueno, que ustedes están en las universidades, So, ¿cómo ustedes se relacionan con estudiantes que vienen por la beca o cómo los estudiantes de su universidad se relacionan con ellos y si ellos se sienten parte de la comunidad porque son estudiantes con beca o pues como gente que son de cualquier país?
Si la pregunta es dirigida, ya está pensando que ustedes han tenido chance de compartir con estudiantes becados de otros países, de África. Si ha sido así, no responden, si no, yo le digo a ella.
A ver, bueno, hay una universidad, tuve la oportunidad de conocer un estudiante que venía de Haití, o sea, un grupo de estudiantes que eran de Haití. Entonces,
Okay, so he was able to like connect with someone who was a student from Haiti.
y sí se sienten parte de la comunidad. Siempre buscan uno, o sea, se ponen en grupo, pues, siempre hay un pequeño grupo que los coge. No es la mayoría, no, depende de la universidad también. Pero ahí en mi caso particular, sí era un amplio grupo donde ellos estaban y se sentían cómodos, pues.
So he was part of a community where he felt like he was a part of.
Entonces, se puede decir que sí son bien recibidos, porque además de que a ellos sean internacionales o no, en el país también se dan otro tipo de becas para estudiantes del interior del país que vayan a estudiar en otras universidades. Entonces, como el mismo ambiente, no hay discriminación, sino que más bien todos se integran y no hay ningún tipo de problema, pues.
You said that essentially, like, because to him it's kind of similar to students who receive scholarships that are like from marginalized communities in Venezuela. So they're just integrated in the community, you know, for all students essentially, and they kind of just make it through together.
Well, I will tell you because they are not in the universities where there is a large number of these students that are getting this benefit. And I am professor in those universities. I mean, I will tell you, the Africans in Venezuela, when they go there, they get the language like this. You know, Africans are persons who are fast with language. The guys and the girls, they don't see the difference between Africa and their countries and Venezuela when they get there. Because they saw around so many African descendants of Venezuela, and they connect quickly. I mean, I got enough when I see how fast the men get a girlfriend. No, and they don't get just one. You know, they are like fast, and I say, how is it possible? When I took a scholarship here in this country, granted by my country, that was not the situation. You know, the people here is like closing their arms, clique, or ethnic group. There is not like that. It's totally open. In fact, one African-American woman that was there studying, a young girl, was asked by another young girl, how is Venezuela? She said to the other, girl, you will be fine. Just like that. The people from Haiti, for example, they have a large Haitian community there living in Venezuela. And the Haitian, you can tell which Haitian and which Venezuelan just when they speak. If they came from Haiti with French or Creole, but if they were born in the country, they are just as adapted as any Afro-Venezuelan. They are now Afro-Venezuelan of Haitian descent. The country has a feature. It's a country that is open in nature. We are getting immigrants. Since after the independence war ended, we start getting European immigrants. And we were very open to the Europeans, so and the Arabs. And the people is really ready and really confident when see immigrants around. They don't feel threat, or they never felt that the immigrant is going to take jobs that are for Venezuelan or that kind of setting. It's a different context. In addition, I would say that our society is too much open. And those students used to live with Venezuelan families. They don't live in hotels. They don't live in dorms, because our Venezuelan universities are not designed with dorms. What the Venezuelan government is doing is placing them with families. And they get together and get along as well as if they were Venezuelan. So in terms of that cultural adaptation, that is our uttermost success in this program.
So I'll say it in English, but so I studied abroad in Cuba, and in their system they have they go by years. So if you go in your freshman year, you stay with the same class until they have like a 5-year program, and so in my experience, the students who were here were able to assimilate quickly because they were taking classes with the same like 50 people each year, and so it was like kind of their process of like being part of the community was very quick. So I was wondering if you guys had the similar situation in Venezuela where like, you know, they kind of stay with the same track, or you can take like various classes.
Yeah, that is right. By law in Venezuela, the class must not be higher than 38 students.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? It's a law. In fact, it's part of the union contract that the professor had. The higher you can go is 38. And by will, if you decide to take more, that is your will. But if you decide not to take more, the law protects you. And yet the system is mostly designed, largely designed, to keep the student of a section, we call it section, or yeah, a section, that will be, the section must run from the very first semester if they take all the credit together, and if they approve all the credit together, they will be advancing together. And mostly of the cases happen that they take the courses together and they approve the courses together. If one of them did not pass the subject, is allowed to go to other section to take the section again. But he always will be part of that bunch, and they will be advancing together from the very first semester to the last semester. All right, that is part of the design, new design that our education now has. Para ustedes, ella preguntó si los estudiantes entran en primer semestre y se mantienen como grupo estándar unidos durante todos los semestres hasta que se gradúan, o pueden inscribir clases donde le da la gana. Yo le expliqué que el sistema está diseñado para que los estudiantes avancen en secciones. Ninguna sección puede tener por contrato nacional entre los docentes más de 38 alumnos. El docente acepta más de 38 si quiere, pero por ley no debe aceptarlo si no quiere. Y además le dije que los alumnos que quedan reprobados en algunas materias están libres de cruzarla en otras secciones para seguir avanzando, pero que generalmente todas sus materias están inscritas en una sección y así van a avanzar. So that is something that's important, because in our education, now we are working in projects. We are not just taking class, taking exams and going. The people need to be part of a group. And from the very first semester, the group need to design a project. And that project will be developed along the career and have different 5 levels. And the group, when get together to start the first project, they don't want to separate, and they want to continue being part of the same group to finish and culminate the project, which will be like the dissertation for them. Because in Venezuela, in the undergraduate level, you need to do a dissertation, a thesis, to get and obtain the title of bachelor degree. It's not something that is just for graduate students. Y les dije que eso importa mucho en Venezuela porque el sistema moderno, mayormente en las universidades politécnicas territoriales del Estado, o por ley obliga a que los chamos trabajen con proyectos. Y del primer semestre hasta el último deben decidir un proyecto que se va desarrollando a lo largo de la carrera, que al final es como la tesis del grupo. Y es obligatorio en Venezuela, cosa que no pasa aquí, es obligatorio que todos los muchachos cuando hacen licenciatura hagan tesis. Aquí no, aquí los chamos se gradúan, hacen tesis, en bachillerato, en bachelor degree, que es licenciatura. Aquí la tesis es obligatoria en posgrado y en doctorado, maestría y doctorado.
Bueno, depende de la carrera, porque algunos como tienen que escribir tesis. No es obligado, pero alguna carrera requiere que tienen que escribir.
Pero muy pocas.
Sí.
Muy poquísimas. Y hay que buscar las universidades donde es así.
So because he said that you're not required to write a thesis when you're getting your bachelor's, but some degree, like some, what's it called? Majors require you to write a thesis, but he said that there are very few compared to Venezuela.
You mentioned earlier that here in this country, the prison system is largely privatized, and just the criminal justice system in general is extremely racist, with police brutality, over-policing, even the CIA, putting drugs into communities to then police them and incarcerate them. So I'd like to know, in Venezuela, what's the criminal justice system like? Is it privatized? Is it public? Is it focused on rehabilitation or incarceration? What's it like?
La pregunta fue dirigida a lo siguiente, en función de lo que usted dijo, profesor, sobre la privatización del sistema educativo, y en función de lo que usted dijo sobre la privatización del sistema penitenciario, que ustedes conocen como el sistema acá, donde organizaciones de seguridad del Estado de este país hasta se han metido a introducir drogas a las comunidades, y hay mucha brutalidad policíaca en contra de la gente. ¿cómo me pudiese decir usted cómo es el sistema judicial en Venezuela? Si es público, si es privatizado, etcétera. Well, our judiciary system is a branch of the power, you know, the judiciary power. It's a branch. And of course, under the Ministry of Interior, which is the executive power, they oversees everything dealing with public safety. I mean, the policing, the police. And that is totally public. Of course, we have at county level and at state level, we have police. And also at national level, we have the national police, which is something new in Venezuela during the last 3 years. Because before that, we don't have like a national police. We have a state police and a county police. But now we have a police that is nationwide. And of course, it belongs to the executive branch of the state under the Ministry of Interior. The judiciary system, the judicial power, is an independent system of courts. And of course, it's public, totally free of charge. And the penitentiary system is under the supervision of the Ministry of Interior. Of course, it's a public penitentiary system. You don't need to pay, or there is not like a system of benefit, capitalistic system of benefit in that area. We now we have been challenged within the last 10 years because that system was public, but along the road became a monster of corruption inside the prisons, where gangs were divided and in collusion with corrupt officials that were the head of the jail. They start doing monkey business, ill business, getting benefit out of the prisoners that were there and out of the families that were paying money to allow their families to get some sort of better treatment or some sort of better access. That is a dark spot in the history of Venezuela, because the incarceration system was a system of punishment, not a system of rehabilitation. But during the last 10 years, we have been doing the effort to change that. But again, we now, this particular year, this very year, we create a new ministry. And this, a new ministry, a new department, you would say here, is the Department of dealing with penitentiary system. We call it el Ministerio de la Penitenciaría, the ministry that deals with all the jails that are in the country. Because during the last year, we have had some upheaval and gang wars inside the penitentiaries. The government decided to get strong into that, to stop the corruption, to separate gangs to different penitentiaries. We are building new penitentiaries, and there is the persuasion. Now we have the persuasion, and the government have the will, and also the persuasion that the penitentiary system must not go into punishment, must be going into rehabilitation. And we are starting the road in that sense, because many people that were part of the system were mind-locked in the old setting. And if you add to that some officials were corrupt, they were not paying a good service to the nation in the sense of serving the people that were incarcerated. They were like, getting profit out of that. But again, when the president decided to create a ministry to address the issue and build new jails to